Once the Constitution was written, it wasn't like they were just done because they had to send that Constitution back to each of the states, and each of the states had to do what is called ratify the Constitution. So basically, ratify means that you're going to vote for it and you're going to turn it into the actual law of the land. Right now, it's just an idea, okay? So the states have to actually vote on it. Well, you'd think that that would be kind of an easy thing, but it wasn't because, it's hard to get 13 people to agree, never mind 13 different states. And so there's this goes back to the states, and they have kind of this like back and forth argument about whether they should have the Constitution or whether they shouldn't. And even Massachusetts, who started the revolution basically, kind of was like, I don't know about this whole new Constitution thing. And some people were like, hey, wait, they're just these like fancy people in Philadelphia, these lawyers and learned people who are trying to make the rules for everybody else. And they're trying to just get us regular people to do whatever they want, which was kind of true. I mean, you only had 55 delegates from all 13 states deciding what the new rules would be. And so there was a lot of worry, too, that this new government might not be any better than the old one. And people were worried about whether or not their rights would be protected and whether the government would just become this kind of like evil thing, kind of like they considered the British government had become before the revolution. And so what ended up happening, well, a few things ended up happening. There's a lot of arguing going back and forth in newspapers, and people for the Constitution were called Federalists, and people against the Constitution were called Anti-Federalists, anti meaning against. And there's a huge collection of essays called the Federalist Papers, which were written in defense of the Constitution. One of the authors of the Federalist Papers, Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, who gets a lot of press coverage lately and a lot of fame because of the Broadway play, Hamilton. But anyway, he was one of the ones who selected just having one strong ruler, almost like a king. That was his idea at the Congress that nobody else liked. But even he, now that there was a Constitution, he wrote like 80-something essays in order to defend the Constitution because he said, hey, we need to have a law, and this law that we came up with is better than what we had, and we need to kind of get this thing going. There's a cool thing in the Constitution that they built in that's called amendments. So basically what that means is that you can amend or add to or fix the Constitution as you go on. So these rules that were written, in the 1700s are not set in stone, which means they don't have to stay exactly the way they were written back then, which makes the Constitution what we call a living document. It can change. So you can add new things to it. You can change it by adding amendments. An amendment is like an extra thing that you attach to it. And so one of the ways they get the rest of the states to ratify or vote for the Constitution is by adding 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights. And what the Bill of Rights is very specifically lists the rights that every American citizen has. And this made people more comfortable. They said, okay, these are our rights. The government promises to recognize these rights. And so by adding 10 amendments called the Bill of Rights to the Constitution, they were able to get it to pass. And it only had to pass with 9 of the 13 states voting. So the Constitution passed in 1788. They started using the Constitution to run the government in 1789. And in 1790, Rhode Island became the last state to ratify the Constitution. It was already put into effect and it was already made law, but they still showed their support by voting for it. So it took quite some time from the end of the Revolutionary War in 1783 to actually have our Constitution in place and ready to go in 1789. So you're going to learn today a little bit more about some of those, or those first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. You're going to learn a little bit about what they are.